Okay, thank everybody for joining us for this Lunch and Learn. Chaim is sponsoring this Lunch and Learn in honor of Kate Robbins. It's Kayla Bas Moshe. May her memory be for a blessing. I personally knew her. I had the privilege of knowing her. I think anybody that knew her knew that she was someone that embedded happiness. Right? She always had a smile. Right? Coming to different classes, a Lunch and Learn or a class in Shabbat. She always say, "Rabbi, right? So what? I can't hear you. Oh, Rabbi, what's going on? Oh, what's this?" She always had that smile, that enthusiasm, right? Always looking to learn something new, but always embracing one of the greatest character traits, which is simcha, which is happiness. So may her memory be for a blessing. The learning that we do today elevate her soul and all of the other souls, but especially her soul. And our hearts are with the Robin family. It is very apropos of the Lunch and Learn that we're doing today. What are we talking about today? Adar, right? The month of Adar represents simcha, happiness, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we attain true happiness? So I gave these short sheets, and I'll be happy to send it to anybody after the class. I have it on my computer, so if anybody wants it, all right, I'll be happy to do that. So happiness is something that we all try to connect with, right? There's many songs about happiness. There's many activities and advertisements, and almost every advertisement, unless it's like, some kind of healthcare thing, right? If it's a car, right? If it's a new house, whatever it is, there's always people smiling, always trying to show that this will make you happy. This will make your life better, right? Which therefore sort of translates into being a more happier person. But reality is, and this was done in 2006, and I'm assuming that if it was done in 2006, the numbers are probably going worse now. The World Health Organization stated that there's nearly 1 million people take their own lives every year, more than those murdered or killed in war. People that take suicide, right, take their own lives, right, mental illness, other reasons, depression, whatever it is, our hearts go out to them. And it is a thing that has to be talked about. It is a thing that has to be dealt with. We can't shove it under the rug. Right? And this is in 2006, and I'm assuming the numbers are much worse. Right? Around the world, almost every 40 seconds, someone takes their life. Now, look at the next line. In most countries, the incidence of suicide is higher than the incidence of international homicide. Approximately 30,000 people die by suicide each year in the United States, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. Now, the United States is a country that is built on opportunity. Right? People have immigrated to the United States. People are still trying to get into the United States. We're very grateful to be able to be living here and in a democracy, in a place of opportunity, in a place where one could achieve greatness and has that freedom to do it. And even in the United States, where one has in theory, all that ability to transform themselves and to change themselves, still 30,000 people that kill themselves every year. Just one more quote. There's the major activities of human being, blah, 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 okay. In his book, The Underheard Cry for Meaning, right? Frankel quotes a study of 60 students in an American university who attempted suicide. The reason given for the suicide attempt of 85% of the students was that life seemed meaningless. Life seems meaningless. In university, right? University is a happening place. There's always something going on. You're studying, you're going for your career, you're looking to your future. We're not talking about people, unfortunately, that don't have that opportunity. We're not talking about people that are homeless or other hardships. That's not their fault necessarily, right? But other hardships. We're talking people that are in university or have that opportunity, and they still feel meaningless. Life is meaningless. There's nothing. They have no excitement in life. They have no purpose in life. The question, and that's what we want to deal with. How do we put meaning into our life? How do we make sure that our life is a life of happiness with all the struggles and the hardships and all the opportunity that we have? How do we make sure that we don't fall, even not to the extreme of suicide? We all have this feeling every once in a while. If you don't, please come to me afterwards. I'd love to have a conversation. But each one of us at some point in our lives, some point of the day, not to the extreme, but some level, feel sometimes a little down, feel a little, what's the purpose of life? Don't have that happiness, of excitement. How do we make sure that we conquer that? What does the Torah have to say about this? What does Judaism have to say about this? Because all the source of all the wisdom is in the Torah, right? Judaism has. So let's get cracking over here. So as I mentioned, this month, right, started last week. It's called the Month of Adar. Right? The Month of Adar is the 12th month in the Jewish calendar. Now this year, right, we get a double whammy. We have 2 months of Adar. Not going to go through right now the whole reason why we have 12 an extra month. Just very quickly for just to make sure that people are sort of on page. We have a lunar calendar, right? Our calendar goes to lunar months. Secular calendar goes with the sun, right? And therefore, every once in a while, right, our calendar starts getting earlier. So if we want to have added a month, Passover would be, right, in the beginning of March. Middle of March, and that's way too early because the Torah, the Bible tells us that Passover has to be in the springtime. And then if next year would be even earlier, right? So therefore, the rabbis have instituted, based off the teachings of the Torah and the oral law, that the whole mathematical equation, which we're not doing today, right? And I'm probably never, if you want to do it, go ahead and, there's plenty of people that do it. Math I like, but it's not my expertise, right? But there's a whole mathematical equation, and based off tradition that the rabbis had of how many years, every so amount of years we add a month. But so this year we're lucky, we have 2 Adars and 2 months of Adar. And the Talmud tells us in Tractate Tainus, the Talmud tells us, right, at page 29a, Nichnas Adar, when the month of Adar comes in, Knisa, when it comes in, Marbim b'simcha, one has to increase their joy. When the month of Adar comes in, one has to increase the joy. So number one, I want to point out, we see that in Judaism, there is a mandate to be happy. The mandate. Month of Adar comes, you have to be happy. To increase your happiness. There's a mandate. It's a law. Even further, says the Sefer HaKuzari, fascinating Jewish book that was written around the year 1100. Right? The Sefer HaKuzari says that we find in the Torah, not only is there a mandate to increase your happiness, but on a regular basis, on a regular day, there's a mitzvah, there's a commandment to be happy. Where do we find this? We find it in the Torah, in the book of Deuteronomy. The end of Deuteronomy, when it says, "V'semachta b'chol hatov asher nasan l'cha Hashem Elokecha," and you should be happy with all the good that God gives you. You should be happy. It says in Kuzari, we see that there's a commandment. There's a commandment to be happy. We find this in another place in the Torah, right after the Bible has the curses. And in 2 places, it speaks about the curses, that if you don't follow the ways of God, and there's curses. And the second time, also in the book of Deuteronomy, God over there says the reason in the Torah, why are the curses coming? Tachas, because Shelo Varata Hashem Elokecha, you did not serve your God. It should have stopped there, right? You didn't serve your God. So that's why it comes. It doesn't stop there. You know what it says? Simcha u'b'tuv le'vav, with happiness and glad in heart. Says the commentaries, you see, it's not coming necessarily because you didn't serve God. But not only for that, because even when you're serving God, you're not doing it with happiness, not doing it with a gladness of heart. The commentaries say over here again, we see there's a positive commandment to be happy. And the obvious question is, what the heck? How could we have a commandment to be happy? Happiness is a state of Happiness is a feeling, right? If I'm having a good day, I'll be happy. I just exercised well, feel good about myself. I'm happy. I just had a intellectual discussion. I feel happy. I just had some great calzones and some sushi. Sorry, guys. Right? All right. So you're happy. Right? You're happy.
Making them unhappy.
I'm sorry. Oh, they should have come. Right? Be happy. Right? How could God command us to be happy? What does it mean, the month of Adar? So last Tuesday was the month of Adar. All of a sudden, I wake up, right? And the Jewish calendar, I don't wake up because the Jewish calendar starts at night. I see. Okay, it's 5:49. It's past sunset. I'm happy. Does that happen? See, I'm making you all happy. Okay, what's this crazy rabbi doing? Right? But did I become happy all of a sudden? I'm like, huh? Oh gosh. The month of Adar comes, increase in happiness. It depends, right? What happened that day, right? For me, I had to wake up at 3:30 in the morning to take my daughter to the airport. I was not happy. That's I can tell you, right? She had a 6 o'clock flight, which she was really supposed to go the day before, right? But her flight was canceled. And I was on the phone the whole day trying to get her back on the next flight, right? Oh, Monday, right? And then I had to wake up at 3:30 a.m. to take her to the airport for the 6 o'clock flight. Does that make me happy? That's how my month of Adar started. Right? And if you all stop and think about it, your day, right? Some days we have better, some days we have worse. So how could the Torah go ahead and command us to be happy? I want to open up to the crowd. Any thoughts? We usually don't do it, but any thoughts?
If we always remember, which is another mitzvah, that we were slaves in Egypt and God took us out of Egypt. Grateful and happy for that.
Okay, so Ken is saying, just if you guys didn't hear, Ken is saying that we're going back, and that's why in our prayer, you find a lot of times we always mention about the exodus of Egypt. So if we go back and say, hey, listen, we were slaves, now we're not slaves, so suck it up and be happy, right? Okay, that's one way of looking at it, but it goes to a certain degree. That was 3 years ago, right? 3,500 years ago. So yeah, we could, but practically it's not that, you know. Any other thoughts? Anybody on Zoom want to add in? Go ahead.
Okay. If we can be grateful for all the things that we have, then we can be joyful and happy.
Okay, so gratitude brings happiness. We'll talk about that. But what about when I'm going through a hardship and I don't really think about those stuff?
You don't have to be happy all the time.
So Jim is saying we don't have to be happy all the time.
It's impossible to be happy all the time, because the parts that are difficult makes us appreciate when things are good.
So Jim is saying that when the Torah tells us that we should serve God with happiness, not all the time, right? Or the month of it, we don't always have to be happy.
It's not reality.
It's not reality. That was my question.
It's not reality.
Right. That was my question. All right? My question is, it's not reality. So how can we be happy all the time? All right. So Jim is saying, yeah, okay. So case closed. Enjoy the things. I'm leaving. Right? No. But how do we be happy all the time? You can't. Right? That's what we're saying. We can't.
Well, happiness and being satisfied and content aren't necessarily. Happiness isn't necessarily.
Happiness is not necessarily always jumping for joy. Okay. Okay. We have to expand on that.
And the other thing is, the Torah gives us a purpose. And having a meaning to live would bring happiness.
Okay, so having that meaning could bring happiness. Okay, we'll expand on that in a minute. Anybody on Zoom want to add in anything?
So I agree with what you said. You don't have to be jumping up and down and laughing to be happy. It comes in many different forms, like gratitude or just appreciation. There are other ways we can grab onto happiness without jumping up and down with glee.
Okay, I agree to that. Jim wants to add a little more.
I think each person has their own definition of happiness.
Okay.
And you have to figure out what that is. And that's one of the big questions in life, is figuring out
what is your happiness?
Why you're here. We know what our mission is. We've been given it by God, but God hasn't told us how to do it.
go. No, God gives us
Well, but I'm saying.
that's what
God-
we're gonna see. We're gonna see
We
God
all
does
have
give us the
different-
blueprints.
We have different paths also with some basic things, but each person has to figure out what happiness is for them within the rules and ideas of Judaism.
Okay, so we're gonna take that. Go ahead.
I think that,
Okay, two more and then we're gonna
I think it
continue.
has something to do with being a pessimist or an optimist.
Pessimist or an optimist. Okay,
A
that's good.
pessimist will always see this glass half empty, well, nothing can make him happy. And an optimist always feels good and is happy.
You're 100% correct, but let's say, some character traits we're just born with. You see some people, it's like, how do I get out of being a pessimist? How do I become an optimist? I'm always seeing things in a negative way. How do I change myself and become an optimist? Right? We know those people, they're always pessimists. So you say, stop being like, I don't know, that's how I always see things. So how do I change? You're right, we're gonna talk about that.
You know, that's actually a double-edged sword. And from my own personal experience, I recently had a death in the family.
Sorry.
So to me, there was mixed feelings. One, I was happy because I remembered the individual, and I was not happy because of what happened.
Right.
So I'm on a scale, and I try to weigh both, and it's very difficult.
100, you're right, it is difficult. So anybody else on Zoom? Okay, so you're all saying right, but we have to change it up a little bit and come up with a formula and what the Torah tells us of how we're able to navigate the hardships of life. How do we able to, as Jim was saying, find our happiness with the guidelines of what the Torah gives us, right? How do we become more of an optimist and not a pessimist? And how do we do all this stuff? Right. So first, let's talk for a second what we don't do. Right. So Noah Weinberg points out in H.com in his article, that they wrote up, not in his article, right? But that H.com quotes from him. And he says like this: happiness is a universal longing. Yet so many people are unhappy. Why? What society, right? If you look at our society, the whole life, right, would improve if I had a new car. Right? We're constantly looking at what we need. Right? I just need a better job and then I can relax and be happy. If only I can meet the right girl, right? Or the right guy, right? If only I can meet the right basher. Let's just do it that way, right? Yeah, car, what happens, right? You're happy for a little bit and then you see your friend has a better car, right? Right? Or your car is like, okay, whatever, it made me happy for a little bit and then we're done, right? For the whole week, you're walking around there, then you go to being unhappy, right? Sounds familiar? Right? Whatever that may be, right? So if we stop and think about it for a second, right? The things that we think that make ourselves happy do not make ourselves happy. Getting a new car, painting the house, getting a new job, going on vacation. What do? All they do is infuse joy or happiness. I don't want to use that word because that's where we're going to try to change. But an excitement. Let's see. Infuse excitement into your life for X amount of time. Why do you think they're constantly coming up with new roller coaster rides, or new movies, or new excitement, or new gadgets in the car, or new games, or whatever it is in our lives, right? Then games could be, for different people, different things. Some people it's their cars, it's their houses, and whatever it is, right? We're constantly looking for something new because that excitement in our life only lasts for X amount of time, right? And then something else happens. Either a bad thing happens and that overtakes the excitement, right? Or the excitement just weans out because you're done with it. It's like not exciting anymore, right? So that's not what true sympathy is. So let's talk about it for a second. Rev Simpson Pincus points out, right? Simpson Pincus points out, right, that what is one of the defining differences in between Purim and Pesach? So the month of Adar, right? The month of Adar has the holiday of Purim. What makes the month of Adar so special? Right? The holiday of Purim, which is not too far away, believe it or not, right? Is in the month of Adar. What is the unique difference in between the month of Passover and Purim? And please feel free to take some food. Okay? What is the difference? One of the unique differences between Passover and Purim. One of the unique differences, Passover, right, is a holiday, a majestic holiday, a holiday where God revealed himself on the highest level, right, where God made miracles, right? When we go ahead and we have the Seder night and we talk about the 10 plagues and about the exodus of Egypt and the splitting of the sea, God is everywhere in the holiday of Purim. But on the contrary, Purim, God's name is not even mentioned once in the Megillah. Megillah that we read, please mute yourself or I'm going to mute you. Thank you. Right? In the Megillah, right? In the Megillah, right? Which we read on Purim, God's name is not even in there once. Not even once. It was a miracle. That's a hidden miracle. We spoke about this and I don't want to get into this too much, but for our point, the holiday of Purim was a holiday that seemed mundane, seemed part of our ritual, our daily activities. It was Esther got into the political favor of the king, right? Esther happened to be the most beautiful girl, right? She walked a pageant and she was the most beautiful. And therefore she caught the eye of the king. And then she was strategically smart. She didn't reveal who she was until, right, time came that needed to. It looked like it was part of the, part of the regular routine of life. And that's why God's name's not in there. So, okay, yeah, it was a miracle. It's great. Yeah, now 2020 hindsight, we look at it back. Whoa, look at that. And if you're living at the time, not necessarily anything exciting. But Purim is the holiday where we infuse the most simcha than any other holiday. What holiday do we get dressed up on? Not Pesach, except for maybe Ken in this skit, right? But right. But besides that, right? Purim. What holiday is there a mitzvah to drink responsibly? Right. Let's just put it that way. Drink responsibly. Purim. Right. Purim is a holiday where we infuse the most simcha. What is the connection of the holiday which seemed the most regular? Right, the holiday that seemed like part of our daily routine to the holiday that we show the most simcha and therefore even affects the whole month of Adar. What's unique about that? We'll get back to that in a minute. Rav Dessler says something and we're going to go from there. Says Rav Dessler, what is the epidemic disease of the world that robs us of happiness? What is the thing that robs us from that? So the way Rav Dessler is saying that really, naturally, we should all be happy. Even with the hardships of life, naturally, we should all be happy. Right? Says Rav Dessler. What is the thing that robs us of our happiness? Says Rav Dessler, the thing that robs us from that, our sages have already told us the answer. It says in the Mishnah, right, in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Father, it says jealousy, right? Materialistic desires and status seeking, that's honor, kina taiva, kavod, right? Jealousy, kina taiva, lusting after our materialistic possessions and desires, right? And seeking honor removes a person from the world. Now, the commentary says it doesn't mean to say really he dies, but removes himself from his world. Being jealous of someone else, running after materialistic desires, and running after honor robs us of our happiness, our internal happiness. What is this internal happiness that we're talking about? We learned that from Purim. And why is it that jealousy and these things remove it and take it away? It's because the internal happiness that we're talking about is the realization that I have a purpose and seeking to fulfill and to accomplish that purpose. That is true happiness. True happiness is not in the sense, you might not find this translation in the Webster or any other dictionary, right? True happiness is content. It's really being content and having a purpose. That's what we started off. That they find life seemed meaningless. If you don't have a purpose in life, then you can have all the excitement in the world. You can even be living in college, for God's sakes. Right? Which is probably one could have the most party in his life, his or her life, right? Because I'm in college, It's all okay. But even there, you don't have a meaningful life. You don't have a purpose for your life. You have nothing. You don't have any happiness. You don't have any meaning. How do we find meaning in our lives? How do we able to go ahead and realize that there's a purpose in our lives? Is by realizing that our purpose in this world is greater than this world. Realizing that God is infused in every aspect of our lives. Realizing that everything that happens, there's a purpose for it. We understand it or we don't understand it. We see it or we don't see it. Esther, when she became queen, what do you think was going on through her mind? She was not happy. She did not feel like she won the lottery. A good Jewish girl, right, did not want to live in the king's palace and hide her identity. You think she was happy? No, she was not. The Talmud tells us that she was constantly sending private messages to Mordechai, saying, what am I going to do? And what did Mordechai tell her? Mordechai told her, there's a reason why God did this. And you have to accept it. You don't have to be happy with the decision. Because happiness, as Jim was saying, and you guys were saying, is not necessarily as Webster Dictionary translates it. Happiness is realizing that I have a purpose. Happiness is realizing that there is a purpose in what's going on in my life. So if there's something a hardship that's going on through my life, or something that's great that's going on through my life, there's something for me to grow from that. I could create meaning out of that. I could transform that into something positive. And that's where true happiness comes from. The translation that I like to translate simcha is gladness, is content, is meaning. And that is a state of mind. That we could control. I didn't print it out, but my sister, she should live and be well, my sister Batya, right, who is, she's a quadriplegic, right, she can walk from her hip down, from her waist down, right, fascinating person, right, I've talked about her many times. She wrote an article in 8th grade, and I've passed it out in previous years, right, called Happiness. And she goes ahead and talks about, right, this concept, right? In 8th grade she wrote this, right? Talks about this idea, saying she was born, she can't walk, right? She braces and crutches, right? Needs help, friends helping her and things like that. Imagine being a 8th grader, right? Like this in school. And she talks about this concept that the rabbis teach us, that true content, true happiness comes from, doesn't mean to say, as Jimmy said, we have hardships, we cry. The Torah tells us to cry. The Torah tells us to mourn. The Torah tells us that we can't do certain things that might make me too happy, that excitement of happiness. When one mourns, I have to sit on the floor. On Tisha B'Av, we fast and we don't wear leather. We sit on the floor. We sing Eicha and the Lamech. Well, of course we mourn. Of course, we can't always exhort that excitement of happiness. But as the Talmud tells us, the other way, Shenichnas Av, when the month of Av comes in, which is that month of sadness and destruction of the temple and the source of all hardship and anti-Semitism for the Jewish people throughout exile. The Talmud doesn't say, Shenichnas Av ein simcha, there's no happiness. It says, Shenichnas Av memayatin v'simcha, there's less happiness. There's always that core of happiness. We don't exhort our happiness. We don't like Purim dance and all that. And in the month of Adar sing. But there's always that core of the happiness, that meaning, the realization that the purpose of that. That is true happiness. And therefore, when one is jealous of someone else, one is running after materialistic things, and one is always seeking honor, that means to say that the person's lacking within themselves the content of what they have. The content of what God gives them is all that they need. Doesn't mean to say that we can't use our effort in a proper way, go to business, go to school, right? Get a job. Of course you're supposed to do that. God wants you to do that. But whatever you have with all the effort and the things that you've done within the Jewish law, within the confines of doing it in the kosher way. Kosher is more than just food. That then allows you not to be jealous of your friend, not to run after the materialistic things, not to seek honor beyond what your station is. Not to seek honor at all. Moshe Rabbeinu did not seek honor. Honor came to him, did not seek it. Because he had a different perspective of what life's all about. That's a mindset. That we could control in the worst of times, in the greatest of times. As King David himself said, right? Afilu charbay al tzavarai. See, even if I have a sword on my neck, I still believe, right, that God could help me. Even when there's a sword on my neck, I can still believe in God. I can still realize their purpose. Even in death, dying for the sake of God. Jewish people throughout the ages, inquisitions and pogroms, right, throughout the ages, even under death, Rav Yochanan Wasserman of blessed memory, may his blood be revenged, was killed by the Nazis. May their name be bolted out forever and ever. He was a rabbi of his community, and the Nazis came into the community, and they gathered everybody around. And Rav Yochanan spoke to the people. He said, we have a great opportunity to reflect internally and say and realize that we are now being a korban, a sacrifice for the Jewish people. A lofty level to be able to do that. He says, and everybody should put a smile on their face when they're being shot. I don't know if I'll be able to be on that level. But even in death, we can have meaning, because it's not the final solution. Because we believe there's life. The essence of who we are is on the Shema, our soul. There's life, true life, afterwards. Our Shema, our soul, moves on. And what we do in that moment will give meaning to our soul, how we react in every situation. So, go ahead, please.
So is there any meaning for being sad? Like
Beta.
you keep saying about being happy, but sometimes being sad will bring the happiness after that. You just need
Of
to
course,
stop.
yeah, of course. And that's what I said, that we have, on Tisha B'Av, we mourn. Of course we have to be sad.
Well, on a daily basis.
And on a daily basis, it depends on what it is. One, if it's something that's really happened, right? So, yeah, one has to make sure, right, that they reflect on that. But that sadness should not, that the external happiness or sadness, right, is where the barometer happens. And that's Jim's right. You guys are right. That's something that's impossible to always be happy, the external. But the contentness, the realization that everything that happens, as we say, Gamzu Tova, this too is for the best, right? When we say that in the most hard time, doesn't mean to say that we're going to start jumping up and down, right? That's not what it means to say, right? What it means to say that internally we are building within ourselves, right, through our hardship, right, through what's our difficulties and crying, that we still internally realize that we have a purpose and a meaning, and that's true simcha. That is a true simcha. Simcha is not the external. The external is a way of projecting that. And yes, sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, right? But true simcha, right? True gladness is having that purpose and that meaning and realizing everything has a purpose on a certain level. Excellent point. Thank you. So just to bring this idea home, right? Right. It's very interesting, right? You know, if I've done this many times, and the more I think about it, I don't know, it's something interesting to reflect on. But say if you look back, right, to 1957, go back to the early 1900s. I remember speaking to my grandparents, right? Let's go even further back. Let's go back to the 1800s, right? Okay, we have to be careful, right, how far back we go here, right? But whatever it is, if you go back, right? I remember talking to my father, right? He was born in 1950, my father, right? Talking to my grandparents. They had a lot less of materialistic things. I mean, right? Established saying before, I got this for free, right? I got this phone. It flips. It's cool. It's everything, right? I could do everything on it, right? We're so advanced, right? I could get tickets on there. I could book hotels. I could search things on there, right? I could buy things on this little device, right? I'm old enough to remember before we had cell phones, right? Not that old. I remember before that, right? Right? But I used to go riding my bike, right? And every once in a while, I found a payphone, right, and call my mother and say I'm alive, right, and continue my bike ride, right? That's how I look, and you guys even more, right? Depends on how old you are. I'm speaking up. Now we have so much more technology and things. Who had a happier life? Who had a more content life? Something that we have to think about. Our running and our scenes, and that the cell phone is a great thing, but it also makes us available all the time. I remember my Rosh Yeshiva, blessed memory, my rabbi of my yeshiva, who also officiated in our wedding, right? In 99, when cell phones were coming out already. They're already out, but they're the big clunky things. Not everybody had them, right? I remember he was starting to come into the yeshiva people, get a cell phone, not with the whole debate, right? I remember he said, it's definitely will make life more convenient, but it'll also make life more, he said a balagan, right? You make life, right, more chaotic, right? Because we're going to lose the ability to be able to be content with ourselves. It used to be you're in the office, you work. You're in the car, you're on the train, whatever it is, that's it, you're done. You get to the house, unless there's an emergency, right? People wouldn't call you in the house. You're home, you're home. You had a beeper maybe if you're a doctor, things like that. But usually the office is the office, unless you had a home office, but usually it wasn't like that. Now, wherever you are, right? Get a text of this, and if you don't respond right away, let's do a video. Okay, it makes life, but at the same time, it takes away from the quality of life. Right? Being content is not necessarily having more materialistic things. True happiness, right, comes from internal. We could develop that, we could create that. And that's why Shabbat is called Shabbat Yom Menucha. It's not called Yom Simcha. Yom Menucha, a day of Menucha, of contentment, a day that we can reflect internally. We turn off our phones, we disconnect from the world, from the secular world around us. Right? We focus on our family, right? We focus on our neshama, our soul, we focus on our spirituality. We're able to reconnect and create real contentment, which is true happiness. Just want to end, and we'll end with this, right? This Reb Noach Weinberg again, in the article that they have on happiness, he says a couple of things. He says, right, we find that the Talmud tells us the way, and we say, so how do we get to this? What are some of the things that we can do? So we talk about the idea, right? But what are some of the things that we could do? So Pirkei Avos tells us who is rich, right? Who is rich? The one who appreciates what he has. Ezu Asher Hasameach B'Chalko. That's why, says Reb Noach Weinberg, every morning we start off with a series of blessings. Every morning in our prayer, we start off with a series of blessings. Thank God for giving me life, right? Thank God that I can see. Thank God that I can use my hands and feet. Thank God that I could think. Thank God that I can put on my clothes. Right? For the most simple things of life, things that we see, we don't even think of course. That's how it is. But we are recognizing that even the most basic things in our lives, the things that we become accustomed to, the things that are part of routine, that's no miracle. No, we recognize that that's from God. Someone mentioned gratitude. We are grateful, and that builds within us the realization that there is a greater cause, is a greater purpose. With all the hardships, of course, we're externally sad. We mourn. There's laws of mourning, which is sit on the floor. Right? When someone passes away, we don't say, thank you, God. We say, Baruch Dayan Ames, blessed is the just judge. Because of course we can't comprehend it. That's something that's too hard, and God knows that. But we recognize that there's a purpose for everything. And that's the connection to the month of Adar and Purim. As we started off, as we said, Adar, month of Purim, God's name's not in there. Purim, the Jewish people came to realization. They had enlightenment and happiness through the enlightenment of recognizing that everything that transpired, the whole 10 years, right, from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, we read it in 45 minutes, right? But it's a 10-year process. From the beginning to the end was God involved. God was watching out for us. Everything had a purpose. With the hardships of the decree from Esther being taken, right, to the end of where Mordecai and Esther now became, right, sort of royals. From the beginning to the end, even though God did not make an external miracle, God was involved in our daily lives, in the things that we think are natural, things that we call teva, nature. God's involvement in every second. And when we realize that, they had light, then they can have true simcha, that true level of happiness, an internal happiness that then radiates an external happiness. And that, my friends, is what it means in Adar, Rabim B'Simcha. When Month of Adar comes, we start increasing in happiness because throughout the year we have happiness. Even on Tisha B'Av, we have happiness. We have to have that internal happiness. Is always a part of happiness because you always have to have that gladness. You always have to have that meaning of life. We always have to have that realization of there's a purpose for everything in happiness. Different times of the years, we're able to expand on it. Different times of the years, we're able to see it differently. Purim is a time, and Adar is a time that we're able to focus on it on a greater level because a hidden miracle did happen. So let's all reflect on this. Let's all, as we're in the month of Adar, realize and not shove under the carpet our hardships and our difficulties, because that's what leads to not being able to deal with your problems, and leads to, God forbid, depressedness and anything worse. But on the contrary, realize that yes, it's hardship, and yes, we're supposed to cry, and yes, we're supposed to mourn, but at the same time, realize there's a purpose for everything. And there's a reason why everything happens, and we might not know. And we have a purpose in life to accomplish. And we always have something more to grow from. And therefore, we could we could get through that hardship with the nucleus of gladness, of happiness, of simcha still there. And when better times come, we're able to expand on that and grow on that. Thank you all for coming. Thank you again to, thank you again, Chaim. Thank you to the JCA for hosting us as always. And again, this class was dedicated in memory of Kate Robin, and may her neshama and have an aliyah, be elevated. Again, we all miss her. And David, condolences to you and your whole family, and we're standing with you. I'm going to stop recording.